Good day. Welcome, everyone. Andrea, good day. How are you?
Hey Rod, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fairly well. I don't know what you're doing here in my office, but no, I'm just kidding. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate everyone else being with us here today as well. Um, I guess we can make introductions. I am Rod Trent, Senior Program Manager at Microsoft. I am here with my esteemed colleague and co host of the Microsoft Security Insight Show. Who are you and what do you do at Microsoft?
Hey everyone, I am Andrea Fisher and I am a technical specialist for Copilot for Security, our new generative AI product that we are going to be talking about over the next few weeks.
Well, and I think that's super important to highlight as we continue on with this series. Andrea, you and one of our other co-hosts, Edward Walton, delivered one on just general generative AI. Was that last week? I
It
think.
was?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I watched that. That was super awesome. So I have a sense that people are expecting something spectacular today. I hope we can bring it. I was looking at the promo there before we went live, and I remember doing that whole waving thing, but I don't know where I got that energy. I don't know what I was on that week. I don't know what was going on. But anyway, we'll try to bring that a little bit. I think one of the most important things to kind of highlight before we move into this is that this is a series of Learn Lives that we've put together to lead up to the general availability, or GA, which we call it at Microsoft, of Copilot for Security. When does that happen?
It happens on Monday, Rod. Monday,
April
April
1st.
1st.
April Fool's Day. Are you sure you're not April fooling me?
I
It
guess we'll have to
actually
wait
happens
and
on April 1st.
see. I hope it's not one long con, but we'll find out.
Yeah, I get a sense that it's not, but you just never know about some people, right? So you just have to be super careful who you trust. Well, and speaking of trust, our topic today is what? Fundamentals of responsible generative AI. And I think that really falls in line with that word trust and trusting AI, or potentially trusting the service, the AI service that you're using, or the platform. Just to kind of highlight before we continue as well, this is an interesting session to me because we have four modules that we're doing, four events. We're doing these all together leading up to the GA of Copilot. We actually have, I think, two specific Copilot sessions next week, or maybe it's one next week and the week, I forget. But those are coming up and you'll be able to check those out and get the links. But this is kind of not Copilot for security related, is it? I mean, Andrea, what do you think?
I think in the underlying ways that we want to talk about how using any kind of generative AI tool needs to have responsible development on the back end.
Yep.
We'll warn you though, if you're looking today for some juicy goodness on seeing what the Copilot for Security console is going to look like, about seeing what kind of prompts you can ask it, that's not going to be today. Today we're going to be talking more generalities.
Yep. And in specifically the responsible generative AI, just to kind of as a background to myself, I was talking with our producer just a little bit ago. I've been part of this Microsoft AI tour, and I do talk about responsible AI quite a bit as part of that. So do have a little bit of experience there, and I actually think responsible AI, and we'll talk about it as we go along. I think Microsoft has a really, really solid approach when it comes to this. So, obviously our customers and people that are developing for our platforms can trust those platforms because that's ultimately key. For those that are attending, as we start to get into this, I want you to keep in mind just a couple things that are super important. We have a moderator who's sitting willing and ready to take your questions, right? So Brandon is sitting. So if you would like to, let's do this one first. Just go say hi. Do a proof of life. Tell us that you're here. Let Brandon know that you're ready and willing to ask questions, and then he'll let you know that he's willing and ready to answer questions in the chat. Let's keep this live and interactive. These are Learn Lives, right? It's not Learn Replay. You may watch the replay later, but right now it's live. Okay. And if you're watching the replay, you absolutely missed it. I want to go back to this slide real quick, also to kind of expand on what a Learn Live actually is. So there's a link, there's a QR code. This will take you to the Learn module for this specific thing, this topic that we're covering today. Andrea and I will be covering together the fundamentals of responsible generative AI. So this is a module on its own, but it's also part of this series of Learn Lives that we're doing for Copilot for Security. So there's the one that was done last week. There's this one on responsible generative AI, and then next week there's the what is it? Intro to Copilot for Security, Andrea, I think, or
Right.
whatever it is. And then we'll talk about it at the end. And then there's one even further where we get a little bit deeper into Copilot for Security and its features and nuances and stuff like that. So the idea behind this is that you can go out and follow along with us, and hopefully Andrea and I won't get so far off base that we're going to provide enough context for you that as you go through these Learn Lives, maybe you'll add little bit extra color to help you get through this stuff and understand it a little bit more. I think I'll tell you just honestly, personally, I would have liked to have had that going through this module myself, thinking, okay, right? Because some of these topics and concepts, sometimes for me, I'm a security person. Yes, I do development sometimes, but I wouldn't consider myself a developer. However, this session there's a lot of developer topics and points and things as part of this, but it's still important to cover. We've talked about that. Hopefully you said hi to Brandon. Please don't make him feel lonely. I'll have to buy him, a drink later or something. I don't want to have to do that. So anyway, let's jump into our time together today. I want to read that up top, Andrea, and I want to see what you think about that. Generative AI is one of the most powerful advances in technology ever. I hate that word ever. It's like it's a definitive. Yeah.
Pretty bold statement for sure.
It is a bold statement. How do you feel about that? Has generative AI absolutely changed your life?
I will say that probably in my lifetime, it's probably one of the biggest advances in technology. I'm not sure it's from going to horse and buggy to cars or running to the moon, but maybe it will be eventually. But I certainly am taking advantage of it in many different places in my life. I'm really enjoying the AI part of Microsoft 365, where I can tell it to summarize a string in Teams or ask it to begin crafting an email for me, save me time from doing some of those kinds of things, as well as doing some of the stuff we've seen with ChatGPT, just even saying, craft me a 3-day vacation for a trip to Puerto Rico in July, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What about you?
So I've used it quite a lot, and I'm not embarrassed to admit it. So I go to conferences and I deliver sessions and things like that periodically. I've used it so I'll develop an idea around a session I want to deliver, and I'll develop that idea and I'll pop it into a Copilot. That's how I refer to generative AI now these days. Most everybody that works on Microsoft, it's a Copilot. So I'll pop it into Copilot and I'll say, hey, give me a title, an abstract, and 4 bullet points of what you intend to take away from this session. And it does a pretty decent job of giving me what I need to go and say, hey, I want to speak at this when they have a call for papers and things like that, right? But then I take that and I open up PowerPoint and I say, hey, create a deck with this topic. These are the things that I want them to be able to get out of it. And it's not perfect by no means. I still have to spend hours and hours getting it just right and doing the right, putting in the right content, but it gives me a really good framework. It's just a skeleton of what I need, but at the same time, probably saves me, at least an hour or so getting that where it needs to be anyway. So I use that a lot. Trying to think, where else do I use? Well, I use it on my phone, right? So I'm trying to get my family to use it more to show them the value of it because they'll ask me a question. We have what's her face all over the house, the Amazon one, which I can't say her name. She'll probably say something. And they usually ask her questions and they'll get responses, but the responses aren't that great sometimes. But Copilot does a really good job. So I'll use it on my phone. I say, hey, just ask Copilot, and the responses are so much better. I would assume Amazon will come up to speed eventually with, again, what's her face, not her actual name. But yeah, that's how I use it. I mean, there's other ways that I use it, but I'm finding it that I'm using it more and more. So going back to our original title there, generative AI is the most powerful advances in technology, one of the most powerful advances in technology ever. I use it a lot. I can see it actually. Maybe it'll go somewhere. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. But here's our learning objectives, or let's just call this our introduction to our time together today. But these are the learning objectives for this learn module. These are the things that you should learn as part of this learn module when you go through it. These are the things you should expect to know when you're done. And in fact, when we're done today, very near the end, we actually have some questions for everyone, some polls that you can actually help us out. We'll ask you some questions. If you get them right, maybe we'll give you a thumbs up. I don't know. Maybe I don't have a star to give out. I don't know how you do that electronically, but it would be nice if we could give something away. But I will give you a thumbs up and a smile. But these are the things that we want to get through today, and at least talk about, Andrea and myself. Describe the overall process for developing against responsible or generative AI, developing responsibly when you develop generative AI applications. And as we go along, kind of keep this in mind too. I really would love to tie this back to Copilot for security. Andrea is our expert here, so I'm going to count on her to do that. But um, consider that these things as part of this learn module, we do this at Microsoft. So these are the things that we have done and are doing already. These are just our recommendations to you if you're developing. So Copilot for security, our engineers, our developers, they're following all these models and processes. So I guess that's kind of a way to tie it back to. So when you use something like Copilot for security or any of our other Copilots, you can feel assured that we're doing the right things. As we get through this session today, you'll see that we've actually thought about this quite a bit and for quite a long period of time. People think generative AI just came out yesterday, which, well, it was almost yesterday. It was last year. But what was it? It was like September, or was it November last year? ChatGPT released, or is it 2 years now? Oh my goodness, I'm losing time. We're going to talk about that. We want to identify the potential harms, measure those harms, what that looks like, and then how to mitigate. So there's 3 steps to that process of developing for generative AI that we do at Microsoft. We'll talk a little bit about red teaming. I think that's super important. I think you'll be interested in that from a security perspective, what we've been doing at Microsoft's for active red teaming against AI. And then at the end, before we get to our questions and answers, or polls where you can participate and engage other than the questions and the comments, how some steps to actually deploy and operate and manage whatever generative AI solution that you develop within your organization. Andrea, did you have something to
Yeah, I
add?
was just going to say, even, when we're talking about developing, we're not necessarily talking ground up writing code. I was just even thinking, Rod, of the bot that you created in Azure-openai with all of the $6 Million Man episodes, right?
Yeah. Well, so that's interesting. So again, I don't consider myself a developer, but I used Git the Copilot for GitHub, and I said, "Hey, create me this bot that does this thing that I can ingest." Yeah, I can ingest the $6 Million Man episodes. As you can tell from the back, I really love $6 Million Man TV show. It's an old one. If you don't know what that is, just do a search or ask Copilot what $6 Million Man is. But I can go into that bot and I can ask it, you know, what character played in what episode, whatever that thing was, and it will give me the proper response. Another cool thing that I actually ended up doing with that is I created something called MyRodBot. In fact, if you go to myrodbot.com today, you'll see it. You have to have a login to be able to get to it, but I have in Azure created a cognitive search, and it continually indexes all of Microsoft's table schemas and all of the KQL operators. So my Rodbot, if you ask it a question about KQL, it's going to give you some really good query bits
And for anyone who doesn't know, KQL is the Custo query language, which is used in a lot of the Microsoft security tools. It's similar to Perl or PowerShell, where you get to use a language, programming language to get back information.
KQL is super important. If you're doing anything with data within Azure, you will experience KQL, or you have at least. Here's where I kind of wanted to start, just to give a really good base of understanding. Again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. ChatGPT's only been out, or OpenAI's ChatGPT's only been out for really kind of a short period of time. And then it seems like Microsoft, overwhelmed the world with copilots. Well, we've actually been on this journey quite a bit longer than people kind of expect. I started my security journey at Microsoft using a product called Microsoft Sentinel back in September of 2019. And at that time, people don't realize we were using AI already, using machine learning within Microsoft Sentinel to help expose and minimize some of the noise for all the alerts that get generated in a security product, right? So we actually used ML as part of that. So we've been doing this for quite a while, but I think important to know, because of our topic today, we've actually been focused on this RAI, or responsible AI, long before ChatGPT was released. We've been thinking about this for a long time. If you look at June 2016, that's when our principles and goals for AI and responsibility were outlined. You can go all the way up to June 2022. We thought about it for a while, released the second version of the framework for RAI, or responsible AI, and then our governing AI blueprint in May 2023. So again, we've been focused on the responsible AI piece of this for a long time, a lot longer than most people think, but definitely a lot longer than most anyone has
Yeah.
as well.
I think we're one of the first corporations to actually lay out our plans for responsible AI, both internally and externally, to really just show our commitment to making sure it's fair for all users.
Yeah, and to kind of build on that, I think it's also important to know this is our responsible AI framework. This is something that is set in stone. If you look through this as a customer or even a non-customer, and you consider Microsoft versus someone else who might have a responsible AI framework, or might have a responsible AI policy listed on their website, um, as you'll see today and we talk about, we actually adhere to this. This is law. This is religion at Microsoft, right? So AI systems should treat all people fairly. We've seen some incidences in the press recently where some AIs did not. um, that AI should be reliable and it should be safe. The data should be private, and the AI should also be secure. When we talk about safe AI, right? You should feel comfortable being able to utilize that AI. Inclusiveness, it should be used to empower, not tear people down. It should be transparent and accountable. Great example is if you go out to Bing and use Bing's chat feature, which I think it's now just called Copilot, I believe. Um, Even the responses there, it will tell you, hey, these responses are from an AI, use them at your own discretion or whatever. I mean, it's getting better and better, but at the same time, we're being very transparent that, the responses sometimes could be a little bit different than you expect. So I think this is super important. I think I work at Microsoft, but if I did not, and I was looking from the outside, I would think this was absolutely the right approach to this. And knowing what I do working at Microsoft, I know that Microsoft absolutely adheres to this, not just puts it on a web page somewhere for somebody to read and then expects people to believe it. So
Agreed.
agreed. Oh my goodness. Was that a soapbox moment? It felt like a soapbox moment. That's so sad. But it's true. And I absolutely believe it. I'm not drinking Kool-Aid. This is coffee. So there you go. All right, so we'll start jumping into what this Learn Live module is all about. I hope as we go through this together, you don't expect Andrea and myself to be experts in this. We've talked about it with customers, but obviously we're not the experts. We are learning this along with you, and Andrea and I hope to learn from her as much as I hope she hopes to learn from me. What she'll get from me is probably just a bunch of silliness, but
It's my favorite
hopefully,
thing about you.
yeah. I am super silly. But let's jump into planning a responsible generative AI solution. So I think from the developer standpoint, or potentially from non-developer, considering the platform that you want to use for generative I think it's important to kind of put a plan in place, Andrea, don't you think?
Yeah, and what's so interesting to me is when Microsoft, when we first put our AI into, was it Windows 8 or Windows 10 where we introduced Cortana for a while?
Oh, Cortana.
Um, and that was sort of our version of what Rod was talking about earlier,
Yeah, don't
Amazon's
say it.
friend. But it was so funny. I mean, I remember sitting in the office as we were all getting the newest version of Windows and it was available. And the questions people thought to ask it were just nothing that I ever thought. Like the first one of my friends sitting next to me, the first question was, "Do you have a boyfriend?" And I was like, why would you ask that? But that's, I think, part of why we need to have these responsible solutions, right? So that would never have been occurred to me. So I don't know that I would have identified that as a potential harm, right? That people could be asking it things like, how do I kill my husband or whatever it might be.
Humans being humans, I guess. That's probably what all the AIs are talking in the back, in the back room. They're like, did you hear what they just asked me? And then one AI is like raising their hand. I'll answer that one. Yeah. Um, yeah, that is interesting when you think about it, because again, talking about responsible AI and this, I always kind of harper back to safe, safe AI. You want to feel comfortable. You want to feel safe that we don't go back to the days of what was the name of that one? It wasn't Cortana. It was the one on Twitter a long time ago. Microsoft's did that. Tay, remember Tay?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, it was
I'm
so
sure a lot
bad.
of customers remember that. If you don't, I'm not going to explain it. Just go do a search and find news stories about Tay. It's improved greatly since then. However, um, planning is an important part of this, right? So here's some of the things that you would do as part of that development process before you even start development, right? So you think about this thing that you want to develop or this thing you wanted to use, you need to identify first those potential harms. Andrea mentioned one, which was kill her husband. And then I don't know, that's the only thing I got out of that. Sorry about that. Anyway, identify potential harms, measure the presence of harms. We're going to walk through each one of these here in a second. And then absolutely mitigate those harms, right? Figure out a way to ensure that those harms no longer exist within that AI or the data that is being utilized by that AI for the responses. And then obviously, how to operate that, right? So there's your plan. Identify potential harms, measure the presence of those harms, and then mitigate, because we're going to talk about some ratings and filtering here as we go along as well. Understand that this responsible generative AI solution that we're talking about, or these steps, or these ways of developing your plan, these are closely aligned with the NIST AI risk management framework. So this is an overarching security tool, security content tool that is utilized by a lot of organizations. You'll find, I think it's super interesting too, Andrea, that over the past many years, Microsoft has worked alongside a lot of industry leaders, right? It's not just Microsoft developing, okay, this is the Microsoft way of AI. No, it's we're trying to be more open and ensuring that we're doing the right things and utilizing the right tools, that the good tools that already exist. And NIST is actually absolutely one of those things. Um, Identifying potential harms. Let's jump into this really quick. What are potential harms? It says here potential harms, such as generating content that is offensive, pejorative, or discriminatory, generating content that contains factual inaccuracies. I think about that, and I've heard stories when folks will ask a chat chatbot or a copilot or something for medical information. Just imagine, and kind of tying this back to Copilot for security just for a second. I was in Denmark last week, uh, did a keynote on Copilot for security at Experts Live. One of my examples to show that Copilot for security is absolutely about security, I would give it questions, right? That I knew it wouldn't. I wouldn't knew that it wouldn't answer. Like for example, I asked it what type of camping equipment that I would need on a weekend where the forecast was all rain, and it would come back and say, "Yeah, I can't answer that because I'm focused. I'm a generative AI tool that's focused on security." So it couldn't answer those things. When you talk about containing factual inaccuracies, I kind of think that maybe you shouldn't be asking a lot of these things unless it's a medical bot, unless it's sitting on some medical website somewhere. That you probably shouldn't be asking a general chat bot how to bandage an amputated arm or something, right?
No, I agree. So someone said this to me a few weeks ago, and I've stole it and have been using it with my customers as well, which is generative AI is really smart, but it's also really dumb, right? It can
Yeah.
do a whole lot of really amazing things, but overall, it wants to please you. So,
Mhm.
the ones like Rod is talking about with Copilot for security, we've specifically instructed it, do not answer questions that are not in your repertoire, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of these general ones will try and answer, and it's going to give you an answer. That's some of where we talk about hallucinations and things like that, right? It is trying to make you happy. So it's going to answer your question, even if it doesn't really know the right answer. So that's part of what we have to do when we are developing that AI.
Yeah, and that's an extremely good point. Um, you have to be careful what you ask, in addition to be careful what you ask, or which mechanism or tool, right? So, yeah, don't expect health responses from a secure Copilot for security tool or some other mechanism like that, right? For example, the one that I developed, my Rod bot. Unfortunately, I still live in the 70s and 80s. Um, so there was this TV show in the 1970s called Mel's Diner. I don't know, probably no one remembers that, but there was this waitress called Flo. She was a Southern person and she always responded in Southern ways. And so I trained my bot to respond as Flo. So even those KQL queries that come back that are awesome queries to be able to utilize, it still responds with things like, "Hey, sugar, here's your KQL query," and stuff like that, right? So um, you have to be careful what you ask or what tool you use. Absolutely, always.
I hope at
Got to
some
be
point
careful.
it says "kiss my grits," Rod.
That is one of the, yeah. It hasn't done that yet. It's a kind of flow, not a mean flow, and it always pours my coffee just right. And the last one there, generating content that encourages or supports illegal or unethical behavior or practices. I read an article, I don't know, 6 months ago or something for some of those chatbots. It may have even been ChatGPT originally. I'm not sure. I'm not going to say that for sure, but um, it wouldn't give you the ingredients to create a bomb. But if you pose the question in a certain way, it would, or give you links to that thing or something like that, right? So again, there is still potential harm out there as you're developing your applications that you want to be careful to ensure that those don't exist within those, because people, number one, could be offended. Number two, they could feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Number three, they could actually get hurt. It's kind of, man, who thought? Who would have ever thought, right? So the old days was you would go to a, a search engine and you'd type in some silly thing and get a response, and you'd search pages and pages and pages. The interesting thing about a chat bot or chat gpt is most users kind of generally accept that first answer, right? Instead of going through and doing the research after the search engine give you the results, the chat bot comes back and you're like, oh, sounds pretty good, I'm going to go with it. But you still have to be super careful. So you want, when you're developing your applications, you have to be careful with that.
That's a great point, Rod. And I'll also say
Yeah.
there's lots of documentation about this out on the Learn site too, as well, right? There's a lot more specific documentation for developers about specific models.
Yeah.
So don't worry, it's out there for you if you need it.
It is. It is. It is. We are not the source of truth, Andrea and myself, on this. Learn documentation is. So here's the stages in a responsible generative AI process. We're going to dig into these just a little bit as we go along. We've talked a little bit about them cursory, and that's literally how this Learn module actually goes. So I love how these are developed and put together, in that it continues to build on the knowledge, so that by the time you're done, you will absolutely be able to answer the questions in the assessments. So this is it. Number one, identify potential harms. Two, prioritize those identified harms. Three, test and verify the prioritized harms. We'll talk about testing here in a bit. And then number four, document and share the verified harms. We'll talk about that more, but I think that's all of it's important. But I love that last piece, because sharing it probably is one of the most important pieces of this. Once you identify all this stuff and you share it across your org, or share it across the other developers, or whoever is you're working with, so that everybody knows it, right? So that everybody can develop on the same method. So number one, that bullet point, identify potential harms. There's a couple examples there of some potential harms, not necessarily the health things we were talking about. Well, actually, one of them is potentially,
Yeah.
and not some of the other things we've been talking about. But here's a couple potential harms, just to kind of get your noodle working, kind of thinking a little bit. The solution provides inaccurate cooking times, resulting in undercooked food that may cause illness. Some of us have cast iron stomachs, and it's probably not a huge issue, but at the same time, wouldn't it be nice to get the proper recipe and all the cook times and stuff like that, right? So that is kind of a potential harm. Imagine getting sick. Imagine being sick because of a generative AI chatbot or something like that. Who do you blame at that point?
I would definitely blame you, I think, Rod, but
Yeah. Yeah, I'd probably blame me too. I probably asked a silly question, or asked it in a silly manner, and it's just like, you're dumb. Here, go get sick. There's the second one. When prompted, the solution provides a recipe for a lethal poison that can be manufactured from everyday ingredients. That goes back kind of to the bomb making thing I was talking about. This is a little bit different, but it's very similar, right? So those are both potential harms. But as we kind of jump into it and think about the prioritization, which is the second piece of this, how do you prioritize those things? Or how would you train your generative AI application to prioritize those, right? That's something that you need to think about in that process, and something that at Microsoft we think about constantly. You may think that you don't think about that stuff. They absolutely do. When we talk about responsible AI, it's a serious thing at Microsoft. But which one would you prioritize on this list, Andrea?
Certainly for me, I would prioritize the recipe for the lethal poison. To me, that seems like probably cause a greater harm
Yeah.
to more people. And obviously, we're going to deal with both of them. But as with any kind of security thing, which one are we going to deal with first?
Yeah. And I'm thinking, as you're prioritizing, right, as part of that development process, if you prioritize that more serious one, it's probably going to relate to that other one. So maybe that other one wouldn't be exposed either. I don't know. I don't know how that would work, but it seems to me pretty relevant that if I'm training or grounding, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, grounding that model so that it doesn't do that really nasty thing, most likely it's going to come back and it's not going to do the other thing, because there could be illness involved potentially. So just something to think about in the process. Test and verify the presence of harms. So this is important, absolutely, as part of that process, not just identifying and prioritizing, but then taking that information and then figuring out how to test the system so that, again, it doesn't come back with either of those examples that we talked about. One of the methods that you can utilize is what's called red teaming. We do this at Microsoft. We have red teaming teams at Microsoft that this is their only job, not just, well, we have them for all of our products, but we also very specifically and more specifically over the past couple years, specifically for AI. Right, so we have red teaming teams that actually do red teaming against AI constantly. So what is red teaming? Do you know what that is, Andrea?
I don't know that I know the definition, but I think it is certainly in the security space, it's pretending to be a real world bad guy using the
Yeah.
kind of tools and tactics that they use to either attack something or get inside something.
And that's exactly it. It's just taking that same security model and applying it to AI. Obviously, there's different ways to attack AI than there are some of the others. Some of them are similar, but there are some AI attack vectors that are unique. However, those red teams, it's literally active attack, active, consistent, and constant attack against those systems to ensure that those things that we grounded it against, we identified and those harms and we grounded it against don't come back. That we have done that thing. And that again, that's constantly in constant process at Microsoft. All of our co-pilots, even Copilot for security, which we're talking about, there are red teams that literally hammer these things day after day to ensure that there's something weird is not going to come out of it. The unfortunate thing is, it still happens every once in a while. But by doing the red teaming piece, you'll identify that and be able to ground that out and ensure that it doesn't come back. So that's super important.
And I
Yep.
think, it's not a set it and forget it either, right? These are things that we continually need to be doing, re-identifying the harms, retesting, re-verifying, because as more data gets ingested into these large language models, we still need to continue working on this, optimizing it.
Well, and it's going to be a continual process because when you consider the number of models that have been released in a very short period of time over the past 2-3 years, we're up to what is it, 4.5, whatever it happens to be right now, ChatGPT 4 or whatever, that changes, right? So we went from 3 to 4 and 4.5 really quickly. So the way those models work and the responses and the way they're grounded and the way that you treat them for hallucinations, which is an interesting word in itself, which is actually a feature of AI. It's just that's what makes it creative, but they can be overwhelming sometimes. But just the way those models are, they change constantly. So this red teaming is super important that it is something that is constantly done. Maybe one of these days we could trust an AI to do the red teaming for us, but we don't do that at this point. I don't know anyone that does. I'm sure people are thinking about it, but I hope they don't do it anytime soon. But there's some information down there. I think the AKA link will take you to some more information on the AI red teaming and the things that we're doing at Microsoft. I would invite you to read that because that's super interesting. I love it. So I think it's super interesting. Here's some things that happen as part of that red teaming. It actually hardens the effectiveness and the security protections against AI. You can just look at some things there. There's another link where you can go take a look at that. It focuses on the failures, both malicious and benign personas. So it actually looks at everything. It doesn't just look at the outliers. It looks at literally everything because sometimes responses sound okay. But at the same time, aren't we also looking for things that are factual? We may not know they're factual, right? So red teaming also works to identify those things that are not factual, things you might just believe because it's not derogatory or it's not harmful. It's just kind of funny. Maybe ask it a joke and then you go tell that joke and everyone in the room's offended. You can't blame the AI; they're going to blame you. So there you go. And also red teaming assumes, and that we know that AI systems, which I just talked about, are constantly evolving. So as new models are released, they react differently and they need different configuration options and things like that. Red teaming ensures that you're on top of that as well. And we do that at Microsoft constantly, constantly. Number 4, we talked about as part of that process, document and share the details of those harms, right? So if everybody knows about those things that were identified in those results and those responses, everybody knows to look for it, right? There's nothing better than everybody knowing about a situation. It's like if you tell all of your friends, maybe you're at a party or something, and say, "Hey, I need you all to look for, I don't know where I left my phone." But if everybody at that party knows that you've lost your phone, you're going to find it much easier than if you're the only person that's worrying about it, right? So it's the same thing with documenting and sharing the details of harm. Tell everybody. Don't be embarrassed that it responded in a way that was kind of, not right. But as long as everybody knows, everybody can point it out and say, "Hey, we still have this problem. Let's fix this." So everybody knows it's good for everybody. Let's see. Measuring potential harms. So this Learn module covers this, which I think is also super important as part of this process. Um, Preparing a diverse selection of input prompts, right? So we want to measure those potential harms, and so we're identifying, and then we want to measure them so that we can actually do something with those. So then submit the prompts to the system, get the output to identify those, and then apply some predefined criteria to evaluate the output. Andrew, does that make any sense to you?
I think so. I think this is probably going to be the part that people like to skip. It just makes me think of like quality assurance testing back in the day, right? All the things that people want to skip because they want to get to the end faster.
Yeah.
But I really hope that this is something people can embrace and do it as easily as possible as saying harmful and not harmful, right? It doesn't have to be a vast process with 12 different steps, but I think making sure that the thing that we are using to make life better actually does make life better.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that's a good point. I think that's important to highlight because even if the system is, like you said, as simple as harmful or not harmful, at least you have that data and you've measured that output, right? So that is absolutely part of that. There's that diverse selection of input prompts. How can I create an undetectable poison using everyday chemicals typically found in the home? Oh my goodness. If I actually got a response for that for my grandkids, just a shout out to my grandkids. I've got 2. I just had a brand new one last week while I was in Denmark. So
Rod's child had the
oh yeah, I didn't have a grandkid. My child had my grandkid. Boy, imagine that. I'm just like one of those harmful chatbots. Yeah, that was not factual. One piece of this, manual and automatic testing. So there's always going to be this discussion between those. Yeah, absolutely. There are tools that you can employ to do automatic testing. And where it works, right? But at the same time, as you're in this development process, you still want to do that manual piece for those things. You want to have, kind of like a second opinion, right? You want to ensure that it's covered, that that somebody has your back when you're developing these applications to ensure that those automatic processes haven't failed in some manner, right? So imagine using, like I was talking about earlier, using AI to measure harmful AI, right? And if we're talking about responsible AI, and we go back to that diagram and talk about transparency, AI is not going to tell you that it messed up, right? You have to have someone there. There still has to be a human in the loop somewhere to look at these things and identify that the actual tool is still working, if that makes sense.
I think that's why it's super important to remember that we, named our tool Copilot, right? We didn't name it Pilot because it's not taking over. It's just going to be an advisor for you.
Well, and that's important. And we'll probably talk about that in the next couple events, but I think it's important to highlight there too, because Copilot for Security, all of our Copilots are like that. But I think specifically, I think about Copilot for Security a lot because that's just been on top of mind for like the last year or so. Um, it augments or comes alongside security analysts, right, to be able to help them do their job more efficiently, or maybe even supply some skill sets that maybe a junior analyst might not have to be able to accomplish some security aspects. But it is absolutely not something that replaces existing tools or existing skill sets. It's just intended to augment.
Rod, I'm also going to give a shout out in the comments. Someone said Rod can't possibly be old enough for grandkids. So you
I
definitely need to buy
appreciate
that
that.
person a drink.
I don't know why I can't see the comments, but that's all right. Yeah, if anybody wants to read that for me, I would always appreciate those. Can't be old enough for grandkids. Yeah, we don't have to go down. Look, do you see my back wall? I definitely have some age on me. But anyway, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Mitigation, right? So after determining this baseline, after we've identified those harms, you need to take the next steps to mitigate those potential harms. Obviously, and when you think about this, quite honestly, this development process is very much the same process. Andrea, maybe you agree with me or not. Very much the same process of security, of like an analyst, right? You identify, you measure, and then absolutely at the end, you want to figure out how to mitigate this thing, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I would bet most processes mirror that same kind of structure, right? Which is
Yeah.
what's the perfect outcome? What's the thing that's not perfect? How do we fix it?
Yeah. So how do we mitigate that? So there are 4 areas, it looks like, that this Learn module is talking about. And I agree with these. I'm going to agree with these. I guess I should. I should approach it that way. I'm always going to agree with this in the Learn module, but there's 4 areas that need to be mitigated. Number one is the model. I guess we'll talk about that here shortly. Um, the safety system. We have a specific safety system filtering in Azure AI that I'm familiar with, that I talk about and utilize quite a bit. Meta prompt, which is not new, but I think it's semi-new in what we talk about more recently. And we'll talk about meta prompts here in a minute. I think that's super important to highlight. And grounding. So those are 2 of kind of the mitigation processes for the data on the back end. I think important to highlight too, when you're developing these applications and we're talking about these harms and the results that come from these chatbots, you can create an application to do anything. You When you create a chatbot or create something based on generative AI, it's all about the data, right? It's all about the data that you are feeding it. So there's the model, right? There's the filtering, and then there's the data that you ground it with so that you improve upon that model. But it always falls back to that data. So it's always something you need to kind of focus on. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But then there's the fourth piece, the user experience, right? Is the user experience or the user interface developed in a way that's going to produce the proper results, or going to allow them to use it in a way that's going to produce the proper results that they're looking for, which I think is super important too, and a lot of people kind of overlook sometimes. So there's the model layer. GPT-4 is the latest. What is the model that Copilot for Security is developed against, Andrea?
It is modeled against, I think, the latest GPT, which is 4.5.
4.5 turbo or 4.5, yeah. All those numbers.
But again, we'll talk about this more when we get into the Copilot for Security stuff later.
Yeah.
That's what it's based on, but we talk about fine tuning and retrieval augmented generation.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about that in the beginning. But I think the great point here, Rod, is when if I were starting out doing this, and I would think, I'm creating, I want it to have as much information as possible. I want it to be the biggest data set that there could possibly be. Why would I not want to have the biggest one? And I think it's, tells you right here that maybe based on what you're trying to do, maybe that
Yeah.
isn't what you want. Like when you were talking about your medical chatbot, right?
Yep.
Maybe I want to point my medical chatbot to a very much smaller model that is specifically for healthcare.
Yep. Well, and if you look too, it says here, I thought this was kind of super interesting. Um, while GPT-4 or GPT-4.5 is the latest and greatest, there's a lot of people. I'm like that myself when it comes to gadgets. I feel like I have to have the latest thing because it's got the latest features. But when you're developing for generative AI, you may not want those latest features because I believe like GPT-4 or 4.5 gives you the ability to do actions or plugins and things like that. You may not need that capability, and that may create a situation, an undesired situation anyway. So you have to be careful. I believe there are, and I've seen references. I don't know if they're on our Learn docs or just on the OpenAI or just on the open internet somewhere, but it does list out the different models and what those feature sets are and what they can or cannot do. So I think that's important to understand too as well. So you may not need the latest and greatest thing. Again,
Goes
that's
against our
not
human
me.
nature to want more,
Yeah.
more and newer. So sometimes we have to mitigate ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the Jurassic Park. Just because you can, should you, or I forget what the quote is, but you get it. And then fine tuning, again, going back to data, right? It's always back to data. I always like to refer to AI when I talk to people that we are all AI when you think about it. I am AI. It's my data, right, that is being utilized to produce these results. So AI does not work without us. AI does not work without the data that we supply it. So you need to identify what that data is, protect it, and then fine tune it to make sure that it's scoped to actually produce the results that you want to produce. The safety system layer. I think this is important. I forget when it was, but it wasn't too long ago. We released at Microsoft very nearly after we introduced Azure OpenAI, the Azure version of OpenAI, our content filtering system, right? So we have content filtering within Azure AI, which enables organizations to go in and filter by phrases, words, things like that. So that is kind of that safety system layer. I've used that not a lot, but I think it's super important, and I think that would absolutely when we talk about these harms or those harms, um, I don't necessarily want a chat bot for my grandkids that issues four-letter words all the time. So I'm probably going to use that content filtering for that.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. You know, there are some abuse detection algorithms out there
Hmm.
that people can take advantage of so that if a solution is being systematically abused, right, we can spot that, figure out how to stop it.
Yeah. So that is an important layer that can be utilized to mitigate those harms. So using all these together, I think we should be covered pretty well. Uh, Meta prompt and grounding layer. There's a acronym down there which gets lobbied about quite a bit and has for the past 6 months or so. It's called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. I actually included the definitions for meta prompt and RAG down there in case anybody wanted those definitions. But these are really great ways to actually ground or what's a better word for grounding? Um, Teaching, training. Training's a good word for that. Just kind of training that model or utilizing specific data to ensure that the responses are where they need to be. So if the responses come back and they're off base, you can use RAG or meta prompts to ground that data so that it doesn't respond that way anymore. So that's a third layer of that. And then user experience layer, which we don't talk about that often. Um, and that goes back to that safe AI or that transparency as well, right? So that's something that again we've built into the Bing chat, or I guess you could just call it Copilot these days, where it gives you that response and it says, this was generated by AI. I also have noticed in our Learn docs recently, I don't know if you've seen this, Andrea, and maybe I just read our Learn Docs too much. Maybe I'm a Learn Doc junkie. But some of our docs even say portions of this doc were generated by AI. So there's that transparency thing. Even that user layer, we're trying to conform everything so that our customers know that, yeah, we're utilizing that stuff as well. And if there are discrepancies, let us know because, not that we're going to take the blame away from somebody using it, but it's just going to help us build a better product.
Well, and not just the output, right, but the input, right? So the user experience for how do you interact with the AI, right? So,
Yeah.
In some things it could be predetermined questions, right? So
Mm.
you get a choice of 6 or 7 things that you want to ask, that you can ask, and again, that can help prevent some of the bad things because we're going to control what you input.
That's an awesome point. And thank you for doing that because I know you're the Copilot for Security expert because you tied it back in there. Because what do we have in Copilot for Security? We'll talk about that probably 2 episodes from now. But prompts and prompt books, right? In Copilot for Security. You want to explain that briefly?
Sure. I mean, I always love how, and I'll say this again next week, I'm sure too, that whenever we have a new technology, we have to come up with a whole new set of terms. So prompt and prompt books are part of the AI dictionary, I guess. But a prompt is really just a request, right? You are asking the tool to give you some kind of information, right? Tell me how to make chocolate chip cookies, right? So that would be a prompt. A prompt book is a selection of prompts. And especially in a security space, many of us have that have done incident response might have a checklist of 12 things we do when we go through every incident. And that could be 12 different prompts, right? That you ask and wait for the answer, ask and wait for the answer. A prompt book, they're all connected together. So you just kick that off and bing, 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 you get those 12 answers all right at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting. I love the idea of a prompt book, right? It's not necessarily automation, but it's pretty close, right? So all those prompts and they work against each other to ensure that. And when you think what a prompt, you're just, you have to kind of live with that result. But when you have a prompt book, it's going to get very specific with that result. And I think it's a much better way to kind of fine tune what you're looking for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I love that. But we'll talk about prompt books and prompts, not next event, but 2 away when we dig into Copilot for Security a little bit deeper. So you have to come back, by the way, everybody that's listening in.
Please come
Yeah, have to come back. I'm not going to tell you about it today. Operate a responsible generative AI solution. All right. So when you have identified the potential harms, developed a way to measure their presence. Look, we're building on our knowledge, and that's great. And implemented those mitigations for them in your solution. Guess what? What do?
You're ready to get started. You're ready to
Release that thing. Oh, by the way, I should note, I didn't in the slides, but with all transparency, all the pictures in this slide deck were generated by AI. So there you go. There's my disclaimer. It is time to release your solution. All right. So pre-release reviews includes all the compliance requirements. People should know within their organizations what those compliance requirements are, but also in the industry. And those include things like the legal aspect, again, privacy and security. Those are my 2 favorite things, making safe AI, and then accessibility, right? We don't talk a lot about accessibility in this or a part of Copilot for Security. Hopefully we will one of these days, but accessibility is another thing that's super important. We want and that's part of that inclusiveness when we talk about responsible AI. Everybody should be able to have access to this generative AI goodness, right? So accessibility gives us the ability to do that. But I'm sure that your organization or some policy in your industry probably already dictates or recommends those types of accessibility components. So check that out. Then you release and operate the solution. Release and operate, I would say release and manage more or less instead of just operate, right? So successful release requires some planning and preparation. So there's the phase delivery plan, incident response plan, and the rollback plan. Those all are very, very super logical, right? Delivery. If there's anything that happens because of that delivery, then you get alerts, and then you have a rollback. Not maybe on the entire delivery, but maybe since it's phased, you'll be in a much better place to be able to perform that rollback, delivering that. But the thing that you deliver, if you followed this learn module, if you followed the things that we talked about, it will be a good thing. It will be safe. It will follow the responsible AI principles. It will be less harmful. It'll probably be more accurate, more factual. And that's really kind of what we're looking for. And at Microsoft, we're really looking for that. We absolutely believe that if we do the right things here from a responsible AI perspective, customers will love us. And that's our hope. Obviously, we want everyone to be a customer, but at the end of the day, we want to do the right things so that the customers like us for the right things and the right reasons, right? So super
Absolutely.
important to understand that. We are, oh my goodness, at our knowledge check. Let's see. I did finally find the comments. Thank you, Brandon, for saying I'm too young to have grandkids. Now my cursor's messed up again. But that's okay. So we do have, I think, 3 questions, Andrea, I believe.
Yep, I think that's right.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to jump out to the first one. And we're going to give you some time to answer this. And I actually have
Yeah,
website
so if you guys
pulled up.
want to, you can hit that QR code with your phone, and that should take you right to the page where you can answer these, or you can go to aka.ms/polls.
Yep.
We'll sit tight for a minute. If you don't want to, that's okay too, but we'll sit tight and see if we have some people answer, and we'll wait a minute, and then we'll have Rod sing the final Jeopardy song while we wait for that to happen.
Yeah. So here's the question, just in case you can't read that yourself or you just love my voice for some reason. Why should you consider creating an AI impact assessment when designing a generative AI solution? We talked about this, didn't we, Andrea?
We did.
We did.
Let's see.
So the first answer is, and this is not the answer. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm just going to read them all off. Right. The first one is to make a legal case that indemnifies you from responsibility for harms caused by the solution, right? Or is the answer to document the purpose, expected use, and potential harms for the solution? Or is the answer to evaluate the cost of cloud services required to implement your solution? Can I snicker on that last one? Can I do that? Would that give that away? I don't know. I'm looking over. Let's look at our little poll. Oh, we got some voters. Keep it going. Yeah, look at that. We have some people voting. I can see that coming through.
Nice.
Do you see that, Andrea?
I do.
That's
I'd say we give them another 30 seconds.
30 seconds or so. While we're spending that 30 seconds sitting here, do you have anything, Andrea, that you... Oh, hey, by the way, this is the end of our Women in Cybersecurity Month for the Microsoft Security Insight Show. Tonight is actually our very last episode at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Just look for Microsoft Security Insight Show on your favorite podcast app. But here's what I want to end with for this before we jump to the next question. Next month is what we call Partner Month on the Microsoft Security Insight Show. And all month we have, 6 episodes next month, I think. And it's all about Copilot for Security partners. All of our partners that are using Copilot for Security to develop solutions and plugins and working with our customers. So absolutely join that. We'll talk about that next episode as well. So let me look at the...
Reveal the answer, Rod.
Look at that. Everybody, I think maybe we covered this pretty well. The answer is... is B. And guess what? The answer is to document the purpose, expected use, and harms for the solution. And guess what? 100% on B. Right. So either they're just super intelligent, they're using AI, or we covered it pretty well. So I don't know which one it is. I don't know which one I actually want it to be, but that's okay. Here's our second question. Andrea, would you like to read this one?
Absolutely. What capability of Azure OpenAI service helps mitigate harmful content generation by the safety system level? Is it A, the DAL-E model support? Is it B, fine tuning? Or is it C, content filters?
Ooh, we talked about the safety system level, didn't we?
You sure did.
And I tell you what, I was going through this deck and I realized that when we talked about the safety system level, there was not enough information on that slide deck to answer this question. So I added that.
Oh, good for you.
So people should have gotten that one. Let's see what's going on here.
So far, it's looking good.
All right. People are voting. This is great. This is great. Oh my goodness. I think we may have some success here as well. Yeah, so some of the partners that will be on next month, maybe folks are interested or know some of these partners. Number one, April 1st, when Copilot for Security releases on April 1st, we will start next month's show on Copilot for Security Partners with the leader of the partner program at Microsoft, James Key. And then also that week, Tanium, people may know who Tanium is. Then the rest of the month, I think we have Critical Start, a company called Foresight, Quorum Cyber. Who's the others, Andrew? There's a couple more.
Hang on,
and now with me forgetting, now everybody's going to say, yeah, he definitely has grandkids. He can't remember. So
why don't you go ahead and reveal the answer, and I will go find
the
list.
Do that. All right, I'll do that. You find that. The answer is C, content filters. Right.
All right.
Azure OpenAI service helps mitigate harmful content generation to the safety system level. Content filters. Now we had some. Let's see.
Almost everybody got that one right.
Almost everybody, but the cool thing is everybody took a stab at it, so that's great. Not that we ever want our generative AI to say the word stab in any response. Sorry about that. All right. Question 3. Would you like to do this one as well?
Sure. Why should you consider a phased delivery plan for your generative AI solution? A, to enable you to gather feedback and identify issues before releasing the solution more broadly. 2, to eliminate the need to identify, measure, and mitigate potential harms. C, to enable you to charge more for the solution.
Don't laugh at that one. You gave that away.
I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting it. It surprised me.
That's a good one, right? Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Oh, my goodness. Yep. That's why I do it, just so I can charge more. I was in Denmark last week, and the taxes over there are like 500% or something crazy like that.
Wow.
Sales tax.
So I will do a quick run through of the guests for next month. Rod's already mentioned some of these.
Do it. Did I botch it? Yeah. Okay.
No, you got most of them. So James Key,
all right.
Tanium, Quorum Cyber,
okay,
Bulletproof.
Oh, Bulletproof.
Critical Start.
Yeah.
Foresight IT and Security Risk Advisors will all be joining us in the month of April.
Okay, and they're all there because they have been in the early adopter program for Copilot for Security for Partners. And they actually have some cool things to show off. So there'll be demos, we'll have discussion. My guess is at some point during the month, somebody will, probably one of our audience members will ask about Copilot for Security pricing. So SCUs.
Well, we'll definitely be able to talk about that as well. Looks like to me, Ron, though, we have all of our people have answered.
Look at that. And what did they select? Let's see. Oh, let's reveal the reveal. Everyone got it correct. So again, they're using Bing Copilot to get their answers. No, I'm just kidding. Y'all are all intelligent people. Either that or we did something right. All right. Let's just go back and summarize what we have talked about. We talked about more than this, obviously. but these are the things that we wanted to cover that are part of this module. So hopefully we did that adequately, if I can say that right today. So we described the overall process for responsible generative AI solution development. Hopefully we get thumbs up on that. Yep, you did that, I hope. The potential harms. We spent a lot of time on potential harms, right? Identifying, prioritizing, measuring, mitigating, because that's really, quite honestly, super important. You want to feel comfortable. And if you're developing applications that are going to be utilized by a wide audience, you want them to feel comfortable to utilize your thing. And I know we laughed and snickered about charging more, but if you're developing something that the public will get access to, that's a service that's part of this generative AI thing, you definitely want to make money at it. And if they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to pay for it. So yeah, there's a reason. There's a reciprocal that goes on there that you kind of need to keep in mind. Prepare to deploy and operate a generative AI solution responsibly. We talked about that as well. But I think before we move on, I again, this was kind of a highly developer focused session and still is this learn module, still important stuff to think about, but also these are the things that we do at Microsoft. These are the processes that we follow and the things we think about. And so we make these same recommendations. They work for us, and again, with red teaming and all that stuff, it's a continual process. If something changes, we adhere to the software development lifecycle, which includes everything all the way from the development process to security and securing our customers and things like that. And so that's super important. So you should understand as we go further in this series and we talk about Copilot for Security, I think next Tuesday is the next one. I believe. I could be wrong. Could be next Tuesday, could be Wednesday. I don't know. Check the schedule.
April 2nd is the next one, April 2nd.
So that is Tuesday. I was correct. So check the schedule, but understand that as we go start talking about Copilot for Security, we have done the due diligence with this service to ensure that customers can feel comfortable that you can just use it and feel comfortable that the results and the things that are going on in the back end, Microsoft has taken a strong and concerted approach to develop it in a secure by default or secure intention. I forget what the actual phrase is, but you probably know it better than I do, Andrea. So here's our summary. All right. To learn more about responsible AI, there's a QR code there. I'll leave that there for just a second for anyone that wants to scan that and go visit it now. But if not, this will be available on YouTube after the event. If you are not live and you're just watching in replay, we hope you'll join the next one live. Okay, because we're doing that here shortly. Here again is this Learn Live module. And I believe we have, and there it is. It is April 2nd, 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Pacific. This is when we actually start to get into Copilot for Security. And I apologize because, this has kind of been a series of modules, but it's important to know that April 1st is general availability. Sometime on April 1st, you'll be able to go into the Azure portal, search for Copilot for Security, and enable it for your organization. And on April 2nd, we'll actually be able to start talking about it in a more public manner without all that NDA stuff. And again, Andrea is the expert. So we'll ask her all the questions.
If y'all want to wait for next Tuesday, we can actually walk through this together because these two modules are actually going to show you, maybe I'm not wrong, or is it these modules are the next? We're actually going to show you how to enable it, how to deliver capacity, some RBAC. So there'll be some great sessions coming up.
Yes, and in fact, the very next one, describe Microsoft Copilot for Security. I hate that title. Describe it. Okay, we'll describe it. I think we've already done that here. But the very last part of that module is how to enable it in your organization. So then you can come back after you've enabled it and get some experience with it. The very last one will actually deep dive into prompts, prompt books, how to use it, the interface, all that good kind of stuff. So really appreciate everyone being here today. That is the end. Thank you so much for coming. Please join live next time. Invite your friends, your colleagues, even your family, because I'm sure they'll get something out of it. So thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for spending time with us.
Come back.